Critical timeline of the Tiananmen Square protest and massacre. 8 people arrested in Hong Kong on eve of 34th anniversary of CCP's Tiananmen Square crackdown. Passage of time is helping CCP erase memories. Tiananmen crackdown is a taboo topic in Hong Kong.
This year, June 4, 2023 marks the 34th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party's Tiananmen Square massacre of pro-democracy students. The massacre highlights the brutal crimes committed by the CCP against its people, especially those the regime thinks might challenge its absolute power. Here is a timeline of critical events leading to the Tiananmen Square protests and the subsequent crackdown by the CCP. April 15, 1989. The death of Hu Yaobang, a former Communist Party leader known for his more liberal views, sparks mourning and calls for political reform. April 22, 1989. Around 50,000 students assemble outside the Great Hall of the People during Hu's memorial service. In an attempt to convey their demands, 3 students endeavor to submit a petition to the CCP, yet their efforts go unnoticed. At the same time, instances of rioting and looting occurred in Xi'an and Changsha. April 27, 1989. 50,000 students challenged the regime by marching towards Tiananmen Square. The crowds of supporters swelled to reach up to 1 million individuals. May 4, 1989. Additional protests emerge, aligning with commemorating the May 4th movement in 1919, another reform movement led by students and intellectuals. May 13, 1989. Hunger strikes began in Tiananmen Square, with students demanding dialogue with the CCP regime and ending corruption. May 13 to 18, 1989. In an embarrassing turn of events for the CCP, protests disrupt the customary welcome ceremony outside the Great Hall of the People during the state visit of Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, known for his reformist approach. The students warmly embrace Gorbachev, referring to him as the ambassador of democracy. May 19, 1989. Party chief Zhao Ziyang visits the students in Tiananmen Square. Despite Zhao's plea for the protesters to disperse, his words were ignored, marking the final public appearance of Zhao, who was later purged from his position. May 20, 1989. Then Premier Li Peng declares martial law in Beijing, signaling the CCP's intention to suppress the protests. Peng is later known as the Butcher of Beijing for his involvement in this event. June 3, 1989. Thousands of soldiers attempt to advance towards Tiananmen Square, but encounter resistance from the citizens who repel the charge. The CCP warned the protesters, asserting that troops and police possess the right to use all methods. June 4, 1989. During the early morning hours, tanks and armored personnel carriers began their assault on the square, ultimately clearing it by dawn. 4 hours later, troops opened fire on unarmed civilians regrouping at the edge of the square. Probably tens of thousands of unarmed protesters were killed in the massacre. June 5th. An unidentified Chinese man stands before and seems to stop a tank group in Tiananmen Square. This image spreads worldwide as a symbol of defiance against a brutal regime. June 9, 1989. Deng Xiaoping, the de facto leader of the CCP at that time, praises military officers and blames peaceful protesters on counter-revolutionaries whom he accuses of attempting to overthrow the party. After the crackdown, the CCP implemented strict measures to control information about the events, censored discussion, and cracked down on dissent. As a result, the Tiananmen Square protests and the subsequent violent suppression remain extremely sensitive topics in China today.
Hong Kong police arrested 8 people, which included activists and artists, on the eve of the 34th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP's, Tiananmen Square crackdown. The move highlights the diminished freedom of expression in the city. According to the police, 4 detained individuals were arrested on charges of disrupting public order and engaging in acts of seditious intent. The others were apprehended for violating public peace. For decades, thousands of people in Hong Kong gathered at Victoria Park on June 4th to hold a candlelight vigil to commemorate the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre of pro-democracy students. Tanks from the CCP's army entered the square and killed many victims, probably tens of thousands of unarmed protesters. But now, after the 2020 national security law, Hong Kong officials have been actively trying to eradicate any evidence of the event, taking steps to eliminate references to the Tiananmen massacre. Statues and artwork commemorating the tragedy, such as the iconic Pillar of Shame, were removed while downplaying the critical incident in school textbooks. The last vigil was permitted to be hosted in 2019 when over 180,000 gathered. Amidst the flickering candlelight, the air resonated with the patriotic song Blood-Stained Glory, amplified through loudspeakers. AP News reported that a day earlier, police took away activists Quan Chunpong and Lau Kai-yi near the former location of the candlelight vigil, shortly after they announced they would not eat for around 24 hours to mourn the victims. By midnight, police detained 5 others. Earlier this week, Hong Kong's security chief warned residents not to hold any special occasion in a few days' time, referencing the Tiananmen Square massacre event, citing national security reasons. A museum honoring the massacre's victims opened on June 2nd in New York. The organizers included Wang Dan, the student leader of the Tiananmen Square protest. The June 4th anniversary of China's brutal crackdown on protesters in Tiananmen Square is now a subject that's so sensitive that businesses in Hong Kong are trying to avoid it. As reported by Bloomberg, for nearly 3 decades, people in Hong Kong held noisy, candlelit vigils in Victoria Park to commemorate this day. However, now businesses here do everything they can to avoid being associated with the topic. Advertisers seeking to congratulate the local newspaper Ming Pao on its 64th anniversary last month steered clear of using that number because of its connotations to June 4th. Instead, they used the phrase, "moving forward toward 65 years," in newspaper advertisements, according to a Facebook post on the online shopping platform As One Mall, which had organized the documentary about the founding of a theater. A cinema in Hong Kong canceled a scheduled private screening on June 4th because it was a sensitive day. The actions demonstrate how the national security law, which went into effect in 2020, has altered daily life in Hong Kong. Local authorities and government organizations removed the Pillar of Shame statue, which honored the crackdown victims, to eradicate all memory of it. Many protest leaders are imprisoned or exiled, and protests have been put to an end. Hong Kong officials warn residents against marking the occasion without referring to it directly. Security Chief Chris Tang previously said authorities will take action against people planning to harm national security on a special occasion in a few days' time. When asked about the anniversary, City Leader John Lee said, "The police will take action resolutely, and people should act in accordance with the law and think of what they do, so as to be ready to face the consequences." Dong Shou Liu, an assistant professor specializing in Chinese politics at the City University of Hong Kong, said, "The Hong Kong government won't explicitly say so, but it's clear that the authorities are directly and indirectly making it impossible for Hong Kongers to commemorate June 4th. He added that any gathering that could embarrass Beijing won't be permitted. China has long forbade discussing the Tiananmen crackdown in public. Radio Free Asia reported that authorities had worked tirelessly to remove the incident from history books, online discussions, and the media. Every June, police descend on the homes of dissidents, placing them under house arrest and forbidding them from posting on the subject or speaking to the media. And with the student protesters well into their 50s and children born after the tragedy being raised with virtually no knowledge of the event, the passage of time is helping the Communist Party erase memories.